Okay, so the second part today is the Electoral College. So we sort of talked about this a little last week. When we have our election in the US, you're not actually electing the president. You're putting your votes towards where our electoral votes will go. So in Kansas, we have 6 electoral votes. We'll get to that part. I want to go ahead and talk about historically. So the Electoral College, its basics were based on the fact that to elect, we had to decide how to elect the president. One, we could let the Congress select since we already elected our Congress members, and then they would decide who was the best person in America to be the president. Or there's the popular election, where we just say, okay, we're just going to have everybody vote, and like the last election, there was only 57% of Americans that are eligible to vote that actually voted. So even though there was that many votes, there we weren't getting but half of the people to actually choose. The Electoral College was sort of a compromise. It made it so that way people who thought the people we already elected should choose happy, and it made the people who thought everybody should vote happy. Because then, when only 57% of people voted, you got the full points, not just partial. This gives states power to elect the president rather than states like Kansas being smaller or South Dakota, North Dakota being tiny. We don't get overpowered by states like California or Illinois or Florida or Texas. It allows everybody's voice to be heard easier. State electoral votes. So the number of your electoral votes equals the amount of representatives a state has in the House and Senate. So as we talked about already, the Senate, everybody gets 2. So then you get their number of House of Representative members. So for example, New York has 27 members of the House of Representatives and 2 senators. So they get 29 votes. Arkansas has 4 members of the House and 2 senators. So they get 6 votes. Arkansas and us are pretty much the same. There are a total of 435 House members, plus 100 senators, plus 3 electors for the District of Columbia for a grand total of 538 electoral votes. Now, those are realigned every time we do a census. So this year was huge because we had the census here in 2020. So after this election, we'll see all the district lines and the numbers get adjusted. Because if a state's population grew, they're going to now have more. If a state has less people, they're going to have less votes. So this is going to be an interesting year after this election because we'll see the new district lines. Each state determines the manner of our selection. Currently, 48 out of the 50 U.S. states are a winner-take-all situation. So if you get 51% of the electors' votes in Kansas, then you get 100% of our points. Whereas in Maine and Nebraska, you're awarded electors based on the statewide vote. So when you get 51% of the vote, you get 50% of the electoral votes. Whereas, so in Nebraska, in Maine, in the last election cycle, you saw out of the 3, I think it was 3 or 4 electoral total votes that Maine receives, 3 of them went to the Democrats and 1 went to the Republican. So it's interesting to see that not always do you get everything. When you vote in your state, you are actually voting for your electors, not a direct election. So yes, our votes count because if you don't, as an adult, vote, then you don't get your sway one way or the other. So how do you win the presidency? In order to win the election and become the president, you must get a majority. What this means, out of 538 votes, you have to get a minimum of 270 to win. Can there be a tie? Yes, we'll talk about that. So the last election, Donald Trump got 306 electoral votes, whereas Clinton received 232. So if we didn't have the Electoral College, just to show this to you, California, Illinois, Virginia, and New York would have had more power than North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, Kansas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, West Virginia, and Montana, Wyoming, Idaho, Utah, and Arizona combined. So out of the 31 states that Donald Trump won, Clinton won 11. And look how close the actual electoral vote is. Because out of winning 19 states, that's how close it can be. So the 2016 election, we had less than 55% of people who voted that were able to. We actually see the popular vote. Hillary Clinton won by 3 million votes. But again, that's barely over half of the U.S. voting. The electoral vote, we see Donald Trump win quite thoroughly. Now, again, it's that close still, even though he won 31 states. So what if no one receives a majority? If no candidate has a majority, then the House will select the president from among the presidential candidates. So the House of Representatives decides. So it'd be great to see that if you're a Republican, you would see if you have a majority of the House of Representative members. If you don't, then most likely the Democrats would win. You can see them vote opposite of party lines, but it's rare. The last time this actually happened was in 1824 for John Quincy Adams. So we're talking almost 200 years since the last time we did not get a win in the Electoral College. Criticism of the college is the fact that the popular vote winner may lose the presidency. We actually saw this, obviously, in 2016 for Hillary Clinton, and we also saw this in 2008 for George W. Bush, because he actually lost the popular vote, but won thanks to the state of Florida. Electors may vote for persons other than their party's presidential and vice presidential candidates. So it's crazy when you think of that. And if no candidate receives a majority, the House of Reps will pick the president and vice president. So in the end, even though we have it set up where the people are deciding our president, it could come down to the original idea of having our representatives do it. Okay, what I want you to think about: how does the Electoral College impact candidate strategy in presidential election campaigns? I want you to think about that really and look at this map. What could you have thought was Hillary Clinton's strategy? What things would you have noticed and would you have went for if you were going for the presidency? So I want you to really think about that, because I'm going to post a picture of our electoral vote map for this year, and you're going to have that as an essay question, I guarantee, on the test. Lastly, will reform happen? Amending the Constitution of the United States is not easy. It's not something you just say, you know what, let's make a change. Let's just do this. It doesn't happen. Small states would be opposed to the reform because they benefit from the current system. Currently, Kansas has more of a voice than if we went popular vote. Because if you go popular vote, there's one state that has only 500,000 people in it. Those 500,000 people's vote would not matter in comparison to the over 36 million people that there are in California. So little states would really suffer from this. Big states would get a big boost. Groups that are concentrated in states with large numbers of electoral votes, such as Cuban Americans, Jewish Americans, urban residents, would be opposed to reform because it would diminish their influence. The fact currently is, when there's a presidential election, everyone tries to buy it for every socioeconomic, cultural group to try and get them to vote for them, because they have to get these certain groups to be able to get certain states. So, like I said, I really want you to think, how does the Electoral College impact candidate strategy in presidential election campaigns? Have a great day, guys.